it was just an amazing experience for me, and I got to tell this because it's true, and it's just funny.
At 90, Jeannie Seely has outlived her rivals, her friends, and most importantly, her enemies. With nothing left to lose, the Queen of the Opry is finally breaking her silence. The story involves a powerful man, a mysterious room, and a box of letters she kept as an insurance policy. The truth, as it turns out, is more shocking than the legend. The girl with the firestorm voice. Long before the whispers, long before a locked door defined her career, and certainly long before a blue dress turned to ash, Jeannie Seely was just a girl from Pennsylvania. Her hands were calloused from hard work, and her voice was a force of nature, way too big for her small steel mill town. You see, her father was a mill worker, and her mother sang church hymns while scrubbing floors. There were no connections to Nashville, no fancy music agents knocking at their door. There was only the crackle of a country radio station and a mind bursting with dreams. At just 16, she took a chance and mailed some lyrics to a publisher in Nashville. As you might expect, she got no reply. But Jeannie wasn't the type to give up. A few years later, at 21, she packed one suitcase and a typewriter that had seen better days and pointed her car south. Truth be told, by the time she rolled into Tennessee, her wallet was nearly empty, but her spirit was full. She worked whatever odd jobs she could find, crashed in borrowed rooms, and spent her nights writing songs. She sang in dusty little bars where most people weren't even listening. Then one night, everything changed. In a smoky club on the edge of town, a man heard her sing. He heard the raw power in her voice, the honesty in a song that would soon become the massive hit, "Don't Touch Me." Just like that, Jeannie Seely was on the radio. The awards started rolling in and the money came with them. Respect, well, that was a different story. Here's the thing, Jeannie didn't fit the mold. She wore her skirts a little shorter and her eyeliner a little bolder. She told jokes from the stage and wasn't afraid to talk back. She didn't call powerful men sir just because they expected it. And worst of all, from their point of view, she sang with a fire that felt a little too real. Her songs weren't sweet little stories of heartbreak. They were storms of feeling, all about desire, guilt, and power. When she first walked onto the sacred Opry stage, she was given a list of rules. No dancing, no showing too much skin, and absolutely no talking back. She just nodded, smiled politely, and went on to do every single one of those things. Behind the curtain, the men in charge were stumped. She was too good to get rid of, but way too bold for them to feel comfortable with. They tried to box her in, giving her terrible time slots and pairing her with performers who didn't give her an ounce of respect. They would whisper insults just loud enough for her to hear, but Jeannie kept showing up night after night. Her grit paid off when she became the first woman to ever regularly host the Grand Ole Opry. People cheered and she smiled for the cameras, but nobody saw the price she was paying. Because that was the same year she was first called down to room 6B and the first time she seriously considered walking away from it all for good. You didn't get an invitation to room 6B. You got a summons. It happened in early 1971 on a night when a fierce storm had knocked out the power in half the Opry House. The main stage lights flickered and died, but the backup generators roared to life so fast the audience barely noticed. Backstage, however, the brief moment of darkness changed everything. A stagehand silently slipped Jeannie a folded piece of paper. It didn't have any words on it, just a room number and a time. Room 6B. She'd never heard of it. Looking around, she realized it wasn't listed on any of the official maps or hallway signs that guided artists through the maze-like backstage area. This place was different. It was part of what insiders called the Island, a secluded, windowless section of the building where the real power operated, far from the public eye. She walked past the familiar green rooms and down a long hall beyond the costume storage. The air grew still and smelled of old paper and stale tobacco. And there it was. No nameplate, not even a sign, just a plain wooden door with a tarnished brass knob. A faint, strange hum came from behind it, a sound like radio static or maybe even quiet breathing. Taking a deep breath, she turned the knob and opened the door. The room inside was small and suffocating. There was one dim lamp, one hardback chair, and one man sitting in it. He didn't bother to introduce himself. He didn't have to. He was one of the quiet bosses, the kind of man whose name never appeared in the papers, but who ran the Opry like his own private kingdom. He looked her over, not with admiration, but with a cold, calculating stare. Then he asked her a question. It was a question so personal and so chilling that she has never repeated it aloud to this day. Her answer didn't even matter because what he was giving her wasn't a request. It was an unmistakable warning about her career and her place at the Opry. 11 minutes later, Jeannie walked out of that room. She was pale and completely silent. She didn't speak to anyone. Instead, she walked straight out to the gravel parking lot. She took off the dress she was wearing, a beautiful blue sequined gown that was one of her favorites. And right there, under the moonlight, she set it on fire. A janitor who saw the smoke later said she just stood there, watching the flames eat the fabric as if she were watching a person disappear. From that day forward, she never wore the color blue on stage again. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was only the beginning of their attempts to control her. After that night, a subtle chill settled over Jeannie's career. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing she could easily point to. Instead, it was a series of small, calculated moves designed to put her in her place. All of a sudden, her set list would be shortened just minutes before she went on stage. The host who introduced her would conveniently forget to mention her latest hit record. Whispers started to spread through the backstage hallways. Rumors that Jeannie was difficult or demanding began to circulate. One Saturday night, a producer pulled her from a primetime show at the last minute. He replaced her with a male newcomer who ended up forgetting half the words to his own songs. It was a clear message, but Jeannie kept coming back. She kept hosting her segments and she kept smiling that radiant smile for the audience who knew nothing of the drama behind the velvet curtain. One evening, she gathered her courage and confronted the very same man from room 6B in the hallway. He simply looked at her, a faint smirk on his face, and said 5 words she would never forget. He told her to be careful, that she was not untouchable. That was the night she started locking her dressing room door, and it was the night she started writing letters. Some of them she mailed to trusted friends, but most she kept for herself, hiding them in an old shoebox under her bed. These weren't diary entries filled with feelings. They weren't lyrics for a new song, and they certainly weren't pleas for sympathy. Truth be told, they were records, meticulously typed out on thin onion skin paper with her old manual typewriter. Each one was dated and signed. Each letter was a factual snapshot of something she wasn't allowed to say out loud. She documented the sideways glances, the veiled warnings, and the stage cues that were mysteriously changed to throw her off. She wrote about the nights her microphone failed to turn on and the time the main curtain was deliberately kept down while she walked out to a silent stage. Jeannie wrote it all down. Every little slight, every act of humiliation, and every single name. She kept these letters locked in that shoebox wrapped in a faded red scarf her mother had given her. She called it her insurance policy. For her, it wasn't about getting revenge, it was about having proof. Because one of the cruelest games the Opry played with its women was to make them think it was all in their heads. They wanted you to believe you were just being too sensitive or taking things too personally. But she knew better, and she was already thinking about what she'd seen happen to other women who dared to have an opinion. The Visitor at Sunset. Years turned into decades. The shoebox remained locked, a silent witness under her bed. Then, in 1991, disaster struck. A fire broke out in her second home in the middle of the night. While most of the house was saved, her bedroom was engulfed in flames. By some miracle, the shoebox survived. The heat had melted the red scarf into the metal, but the lock held firm. Inside, blue-eyed, every single one of those letters was perfectly preserved. That night, sitting on her porch, surrounded by the smell of ash and smoke, she finally opened the box. As she read the words she had typed so long ago, it felt like she was reading about someone else's life. A life that had been trapped, controlled, and nearly erased. She didn't cry. She just whispered into the night air that she knew she wasn't crazy. It was at that moment she made a new plan. She wouldn't burn the letters. She would wait for the perfect moment to use them. As she approached her 90th birthday, that moment finally arrived. It came with a soft knock on her door just after sunset. Jeannie was in her kitchen making her evening tea. She rarely had visitors anymore. Most people her age were gone or had long since stopped calling. But this knock felt different. It was hesitant, almost respectful. Standing on her porch was a young woman no older than 30. She had wide, nervous eyes and was clutching a folder to her chest. She introduced herself with only a first name, explaining that she was a graduate student writing a thesis about the forgotten women of country music. She had driven 6 hours just for the chance to speak with Jeannie. Jeannie was about to politely send the young woman away. She was tired and had told her stories of the old days more times than she could count. But then the visitor said 2 small words that made the entire world seem to stop. Room 6B. It was a name Jeannie had not heard spoken out loud in 50 years. Nobody knew that name. You only knew it if you had been called there, if you had been summoned into the shadows of the Grand Ole Opry's hidden world. A wave of shock must have shown on Jeannie's face because the young woman quickly opened the folder she was holding so tightly. She pulled out a copy of a letter. The moment Jeannie saw it, a cold chill ran down her spine. She knew that typing. It was hers, from her old manual typewriter. The date at the top of the page read, June 15, 1971. It was a perfect record of her second visit to that awful room. The letter described a terrible deal she was forced to accept, a kind of handshake agreement made in the dark. It even mentioned the final warning she received, a clear message that if she ever spoke about what happened, her career would be over before she could even finish her next song on stage. Jeannie looked up, her heart pounding. She had to ask the girl where on earth she found this piece of the past. The story that came out was almost too strange to believe. As it turned out, the letter was found by pure accident. The young researcher was looking through the Opry's private files in a dusty, forgotten closet filled with old stage plans. Tucked away inside a roll of diagrams was Jeannie's letter. A forgotten employee must have hidden it there years and years ago. The researcher said she had to read it 3 times before she understood just how important it was. Jeannie's voice was barely a whisper when she asked why the girl had brought it to her. The young woman looked Jeannie straight in the eye, and her reason was simple and powerful. She believed that what happened to Jeannie was not the only time something like this had occurred. She was sure other women had been silenced in similar ways, and she worried it could easily happen again if someone didn't speak up. That night, long after the visitor left, Jeannie sat alone in her quiet house. For the first time in a very long time, she knew her years of silence were finally coming to an end. The past was no longer just a memory. It had come knocking on her front door, asking for the truth to be told. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. It leaves us with one final question. How many other secrets are still hidden behind the Opry's velvet curtain?